Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me online at thesorcerersguild.com as well as on Facebook at the Sorcerers Guild. Today on Magical Theory, we are going to be talking about chaos magic. Now, there's been a lot of talk in the chaos magic community lately about what exactly chaos magic is. And there's always been the memes, is this chaos magic? Those of you in the community are familiar with those. You have different memes of all the crazy different things or ideas people are doing out there in the world with the catch, is this chaos magic? Sometimes it can be argued it is, sometimes it isn't. It's very hard to argue what exactly is and what it isn't chaos magic. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and try to define what chaos magic is. Okay, now to me, chaos magic isn't so much a school of magic. Yeah, you have your different schools of magic. You have voodoo, Kabbalah, Wicca. You have all these different schools trying to define what magic is. And chaos magic is more a method of discovering what magic is, rather than trying to define it and place it into a specific system. Basically, it's the funk around and find out. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can use the F word on YouTube or not without getting demonetized. It's pretty rare for me to actually put any kind of monetization on these channels or on my videos, but I'd rather not get demonetized, so we're going to say funk around and find out. And that really is just a new way of expressing the old chaos maxim of let results be your guide. And I've talked about that before. And that's the idea that we cast, we see what worked, and then we go from there, and we can actually begin removing parts of the spell to make the spell more efficient, make it work better from there. But we've talked a lot about that. So I'm going to leave a link to that video here. But let's talk a little bit more about why this is different. Now, in your schools of magic, you have this idea that they have, at some point, divined the great mystery. There is an endpoint of, within this system, we have defined that this is what magic is. Now, the problem with that is that magic is not a stagnant thing. I've talked about that a lot in these videos, how it changes for each person, but it also itself changes and evolves. Magic flows. It does not stay still, and it cannot readily be defined. Of course, neither can chaos, but we are using a method to discover what works and what does not, and that changes, and so we must change. And that's one of the other key components to what chaos magic is paradigm shifting. We need to treat faith not as something that we possess or are, as in we have faith in this or that, but treat it as a tool that we can use. Yeah? And I talk about this a lot, of course, with the belief imparts reality. This is a common thing within the sorcery system that I have been teaching you. But it is also one of the key aspects of the chaos magic is that belief imparts reality. And we have to understand, therefore, that we can change that belief. And that is a big part of how chaos magic works. But rather than believing small pieces, often with chaos magic, we will immerse ourselves into a system. And now this is where I keep saying I'm going to do a video on cultural appropriation. This isn't that video still. But there is some danger of cultural appropriation here as we dive into each one of these systems. And moral components aside, there are other reasons why you don't want to just appropriate culture. Because if things don't resonate with you, you're not going to understand them. Yeah, you can't just take a surface aesthetic pull from another magic system and think you're going to get something out of that. Yeah, you have to dive into the system. You have to actually experience it. You need to spend time. You need to actually believe these things. If you're just faking it till you make it, I mean, there is some power in that. Yeah, that's how we develop belief. We just keep repetition. I talk about that as well. The more that a concept is repeated, the more the power of its faith increases. And that's part of what we're doing here. When you're paradigm shifting, the more you tell yourself that you are a Buddhist and follow these principles, the more you believe it. But you need to have more than just a surface understanding to get anything out of these things. So you need to embrace them wholeheartedly. And when you first go into the system, you need to let go of the past, of what you already know, and enter into this and learn this before you can take any part of it and incorporate it into your own system. Now, on the same thing, don't take titles that aren't yours. Yeah, don't go calling yourself a Babaloa if you haven't earned that title. And the same is true with any tradition. Like, I wouldn't want people calling themselves Manitou if they haven't done some way to earn that. Yeah, we don't take other people's titles. That being said, we can take the useful things within a system and make them our own if we do it with respect and actual understanding. And that's why I say this, there's a danger to the self in cultural appropriation. Because if you're just appropriating tools that you don't understand and just doing crazy things with them, you're not really helping yourself. You're not really helping the system. You might make something work, but that's a new thing. Yeah? That's a new thing that you've tried to jam into an old box. Neither thing's working better as well as it could. The new thing that you've discovered would have worked better without trying to steal somebody else's system to create it in. And the old system will probably work better without the new thing in it unless you find a way to congeal them. But you have to understand both of these things. And that can cause confusion on both levels. Now, what do I mean by that? I feel like that wasn't very clear. For example, the cowrie shells that people use in Ifa to do divination. Now, if you wanted to understand this system, you would need to get someone who practiced Ifa and have them teach you this system properly. You can't just go grab a bunch of cowrie shells and throw them around and say you're practicing Ifa. Yeah? Even if you manage to make those cowrie shells through your own understanding work so that you can divine things, you're still not practicing Ifa, no matter how much you say that you are. And this first system may have worked better if you hadn't tried to force it into cowrie shells. Maybe it would have worked better if you had just followed your instinct and used quarters. And then your understanding of that system might have helped you to learn Ifa when you learned Ifa later on. And maybe once you understand both, there would be a way. But again, with these systems that are closed, which Ifa is very much a closed system, we don't want to be taking their words, we don't want to be taking their titles. If you appropriately learn something from that tradition that you feel you need to bring into your own tradition, you only take that which works and you take it respectfully, and you don't use their words and their titles. Yeah? You just add it into your system, taking as little as possible from the culture while still taking that which works in a respectful manner. Now, I don't know, I mean, this is why I haven't done the video on cultural appropriation yet. I don't know if that's really the right way to go about it completely. But I do know that in the end, it is ridiculous to leave behind ideas simply because they came from somewhere else. But we do need to treat these things with respect. So this is kind of a personal choice. The most important thing I have to say there is, if you're going to use something from somewhere else, understand it properly. Because if not, you're doing yourself a disservice. And don't take people's words and titles. Yeah? Don't call yourself things that you're not, simply because you learn to understand the system. Those titles, taking those, that is quite literally appropriation and taking things that are not yours. So don't go telling yourself things that you are not. Now we could get into that, but as for what titles are and are not, but we're not getting, again, this is not the video on cultural appropriation, and though I've totally got sidetracked on that. Okay, so beyond that, we have this idea of, we're still working with belief here, fake it till you make it. And this is one of the most important parts. All that stuff I just said about cultural appropriation does not factor in to things. Yeah? Most chaos magic is done on a astral level. We're working with belief. Now, the beautiful thing about this is we don't need those expensive tools. Sometimes in other traditions, you need exactly this type of stone or this fruit or herb or whatever it is, this exact component. Now, that's the beautiful thing about chaos magic, is first of all, through using the system and funking around and finding out, we can find out what parts are absolutely necessary and remove those parts that are not. But sometimes there is the need for something, but it doesn't need to be that particular thing. This is where belief can become incredibly useful. We can believe a piece of plastic into being moldavite, often, yeah? Because if we understand what moldavite is, if we understand the patterns that are in that rock, if we have actually held that rock, if we have experienced it, then we can believe that experience into a piece of green plastic long enough to cast our spell. And this, to me, is one of the most useful things in chaos magic, is the ability to pretend. Yeah? That's what all this is pretending reality into being. That's all anything is. That's all daily life is. That's the idea behind belief imparts reality. And this can be used in useful ways. We can cut out a four-leaf clover and pretend that it is a real four-leaf clover long enough to cast our luck spell, things like that. And that, to me, is one of the most beautiful parts of chaos magic, is being able to push past limitations simply by filling in the blanks with belief when the material object is not present. That's why you'll find a lot of people using sporks in their chaos magic as athames, is because we are purposely using this concept to pretend that spork into a point, even though the physical object itself isn't a point and is probably made out of plastic, which doesn't resonate that well. But if we've used the athame in the past, we have the momentum of that, we have the concept memorized in our mind, we can actually pretend that truth into something as simple as a spork. And there is power in overcoming that in and of itself, because then we break reality and allow ourselves a more malleable form to work with. And that's why we do the paradigm shifting as well, is to do this to ourselves. In my opinion, we should, between each paradigm shift, come back to a full center. You can go off and become a Buddhist. You can go off and become a Wiccan. And like I said, when you do these systems, pull all the way through them. But we should have a core that is ourselves to come back to, because we don't want, as much as we want to learn from these systems, we don't actually want to lose ourselves in this process. We want to build upon ourselves, to rise ourselves up into something greater, something more, that has more pieces of the information. So that, to me, is chaos magic, is the ability to believe, the ability to evolve, the ability to take belief as a tool and wield it to assimilate new information into a whole that we have created ourselves. Now, there's a lot more we could talk about here. There's, of course, the idea of conflict that is set within the chaos star itself. I haven't seen many people talk about that a lot in the last few years, but for me, the chaos star, the 8-pointed star, is a symbol of the law of paradox. And each one of these points has a meaning that can be changed, but each one should be set opposite. For example, the one that I first began working with when I began utilizing the law of paradox within the chaos star would be chaos, order, life, death, earth, air, fire, water. And I see these as opposing and pulling out from each other to create a balance in the center, like with the eye of the storm that I'm often talking about. And now, we don't see that. I haven't seen that discussion in the community a lot lately about the different points on the star and how they create a conflict in the center, but it is something that was discussed in the past. And one thing I want to be clear there is that I'm not assigning any one meaning to any one of these points. These are things that can be put into place. Yeah? And that's actually part of why I bring this up, is this idea of hold on. Let me think of how I'm going to phrase this. Okay. It's a ready-made cutout that you can put what you want into place, almost like a Mad Lib or a chart. Yeah? Each one of those points on the star could be put something different. It doesn't have to be chaos, order, life, death. It could be anything that's opposite. It could be same, different, up, down. Anything that has an opposite that you can create a spectrum in between to create that understanding in the center. And that's kind of how chaos magic works, is once you have found the diagram that works for you, you can begin plugging different things into parts of the spell. It's like when I talk about in the Sorcerer's Shadow Volume 1, the formula that I use of intent, form, charge, release, or containment. And that is exactly what that is. That is a diagram that I have made in my mind where I can plug different parts into this system from the information I've learned on chaos magic as to what parts are absolutely necessary. And that is intent, form, charge, release, or containment, depending on how the system works. And this is actually, when you're using this chart, that is how you can dissect the different schools of magic, is see where each one of their components, each one of their ideas fit into this chart. And if it doesn't fit into that chart, it's probably a piece that's not needed. If it doesn't fit into this simple formula of intent, form, charge, release. And that is how we can dissect a system, is you find what parts of it create the intent, what parts create the form, how they charge it, and whether they release the spell out or contain it in an object. Okay, let's see. What haven't we covered here? Pop magic. And this is where the momentum comes in. This idea of following the trends, essentially, as there's different flows, different waves of thought that go out there and capture the popular imagination, go out into the zeitgeist and become part of the flow of society for a moment. And a lot of what chaos magic, especially nowadays with the meme magic, is about is catching on to that wave, catching that flow of momentum and tacking your intent into a piece of it and using those flows to surf you where you want to get. Yeah, it's like a wave. That's something that's been talked about in chaos magic a few times, about the idea of us riding the waves of magic. Well, this is the different viral trends. That's why Funk Around and Find Out has become such a thing, is because we are, so many of us, attaching on to that to not only help create that wave, but to ride that wave within our own spells to help us manifest those things that we want to find out. Yeah? And this meme magic, that's a big part of how this works. You want to attach yourself, attach your concept to something that is already out there, has already gained momentum, and already has that charge from the momentum. And the form is the meme itself, so you connect yourself to that meme, and that almost works like the charging, almost like the linking sigil in a way, because you have all these people, like a hypersigil, really any hypersigil. you have a meme that goes out there and is being flowing and being used and people are sharing it all over, if you can attach yourself to that and kind of piggyback off of that energy, and especially if you can get the meme you have shared a few times, it will add to that charge, and it helps broaden your reach when you attach to these larger things and gives you a larger area to work with. Okay, I hope that made sense. Felt like that was a little unclear, but I'm not really sure how to define it better, except for that there is a lot of power in this idea of following these trends. There's a lot of thought wrapped up in these viral memes that we can then use. We've seen the power of that before. And some of that we need to keep in mind so that it isn't repeated, yeah? Anyways, let's see. We've talked about popular magic. Talked a little bit about the 8-pointed chaos star itself and how that's linked to the Eye of the Storm. There's, of course, the people that we give credit to for creating chaos magic. I feel like the concepts themselves have always been a thing. There's always been people in any different school of magic that are striving forward rather than accepting that things how they are and bringing in other types of magic into their own school over time. So the schools think they have the answers, but they often evolve over time despite themselves. So this has always been there. There's always been a bit of chaos in magic. This is just accepting that and allowing for it to be a science, because that's what that is, experimentation. We form a hypothesis, we experiment, we collect the results, and then we find out. And then from there we can refine that process down into a system. Yeah? Okay. So, I don't think I fully defined chaos magic. I'm missing huge portions of the idea still, but we're going to be here forever if I try to define it all, because we're trying to define chaos. This isn't something we can fully put a label on. But, I said the people that started it, and then I never brought up a single name. I mean, of course, there's Austin Spare. A lot of people like to credit Peter Carroll with the coining of the term chaos magic and the beginning of it. I personally feel like that kind of leaves Robert Anton Wilson out of it. Or his books came out a little bit earlier than Peter Carroll's. But these things don't really matter. Not to me. Who created what and when it started. I feel like that is heretical to the system, because we are breaking open ideas. We are trying to get rid of old concepts and simply see what works. So, who came up with what? And trying to follow this person's advice or that person's advice is the closest there is, in my opinion, to heresy within chaos magic. And bad heresy, not good heresy, because, well, we like heresy for the most part. But when we're trying to copy, when we're trying to follow someone else and create dogma within this system and tell people what is or what is not chaos magic, that is the only heresy in the system. That is the only thing that is for sure not chaos magic, is trying to control how other people practice it. Okay, so I think that's going to be it for this episode. I do have a bit of the Anarchy's Last Stand. We're going to be doing the essays for that. But we'll be done with that soon. And we'll see where things go from there. But I'm trying to at least come up with an episode every Saturday on the regular system. The regular episodes. Thank you once again for joining me. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take the opportunity to do so now. Until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.